On Rainier Avenue Radio.world, look for the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show. I'm Dennis Weaver, your good food guide and host, helping you to feel good and look good, and who wouldn't want some of that? All that and more from the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stories, songs, and guests. Begin living the organic good food life, and the rest of your life just may be the best of your life. Always up, baby, to your health.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
If you or a family member are 55 or over and need nursing home level care, but want to keep living where you are, check out Providence Elder Place PACE. This program offers healthcare, housing, transportation, and recreational activities. There are no co-pays or deductibles, and it's covered through Medicare and Medicaid. Providence Elder Place PACE works to keep you healthy and in your home. Call 206-320-5325 or visit providence.org Elder Place. Providence.org Elder Place.
You can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Afternoons with Monique, recording live in Seattle, Washington, every Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good afternoon, Seattle. This is Monique Lee from Seattle, Washington. You're on the Rainier Avenue Radio show, Afternoons with Monique. Today, I am inviting Seattle historian and author Brad Holden on my show to share with you about his work and his books that he's recently published. Please welcome to Afternoons with Monique, Brad Holden.
Hi, Monique. Thank you for having me on your show.
My pleasure. How are you this rainy afternoon in Seattle?
I'm doing okay. I'm staying dry. Yourself?
Doing well. It's dreary, and I heard we're going to have a bunch of rain today.
Yeah, it sounds like the forecast for the next week isn't sounding so great. So yeah, bundle up.
Yeah, right. So I have never met a historian or of Seattle, and I would love to know, what got you into this? Did you study history? When did you go to school to become the author and historian that you are today? Can you share a little bit?
Sure. I actually did not go to school for this. I went to the University of Washington, but I got a degree in anthropology of all things. My interest in history kind of happened later in life. I'm one of those people, I like to go to estate sales, flea markets, garage sales, things like that, to look for random artifacts from Seattle's past, anything that has historical value or looks kind of interesting. And then I bring them home and I research them and find out the story about it. And I have a page for this on Instagram called Seattle Artifacts, where I kind of curate my finds. And it's through this process that I became interested in local history. In fact, a lot of my knowledge about local history has come from doing this over the years and just researching different things and kind of connecting the dots on how the history has evolved over the years.
Well, that's great. So you studied anthropology, was kind of related. What did you study in anthropology that is it related at all to the history of Seattle?
No, I mean, none of my studies at the University of Washington had anything to do with local history, but it prepared me a little bit because with anthropology, you're studying, different cultures and things like that, and how to kind of ethically go in and review those cultures. So that's helped inform me over the years about when it comes to studying different bits of local history where I'm interviewing different people. So it's played in there a little bit, but not much.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you lived in Seattle?
I was actually born in Seattle. We moved around quite a bit during my childhood. I spent a lot of years in Spokane. And then in my later teen years, we moved back here to the Puget Sound area, and I've been here ever since.
Oh, okay. And do you live in Seattle, or do you live in the surrounding area? I think Edmond?
Yeah, I live up in Edmonds, which is just a little north of Seattle. And I've been in Edmonds for over 20 years. So that's where I call home.
Now, I know that you collect some interesting artifacts. Do you want to show the audience some of the interesting things that you have there?
I don't have anything on hand. Everything's kind of put away right now. But I can tell you, so I have artifacts, everything from going back to Seattle's founders from 1851. I have different correspondence and documents from the original founders, all the way up to the Seattle World's Fair of 1962, kind of, and everything in between. So a lot of it is like paper and stuff like that. And again, I have those in folders, and those are put away at the moment, but maybe I can share those with you after the show. I can send you some photos. Oh, there you go. You got some photos there.
Spy by Night. What is this? What is this piece?
Yeah, I posted that recently on my Instagram. So that is a club that operated back in the 1990s on Lake Union. This was pre-Amazon, when it was just mostly a bunch of warehouses and stuff down there.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and this was a really cool club. You would go in there, and it was a restaurant and bar, but then they had all these different interactive attractions off to the side that you can go in. One of them was like a game show. There was a maze, all kinds of different odd things. And you'd just go there, and it was just a night of fun. And I found this recently, I think it was at a garage sale. So I posted it, and I got a lot of comments. So yeah, thank you for posting that. That's neat.
Of course. Now, then we have some other that we found on your Instagram page again.
Yeah.
What is this? And can you tell us?
Sure. So that's a rotating horoscope that was sold as kind of a souvenir item from the 1909 World's Fair in Seattle. It was the first World's Fair in Seattle before the 1962 one, obviously. And this one was held on what is now the grounds of the University of Washington. It was a big deal back then. And this was just a souvenir item, and you would rotate it, and it would tell you your horoscope.
My daughter would probably be excited to see this.
Oh, is that right?
18, and she's really into horoscopes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What got you? Here's some more Sasquatch file.
Yeah,
these are newspaper clippings.
Yeah, somebody sent that to me. It's pretty cool because I've been doing this for a long time. So when people find things, in their grandparents' attic, or they're moving and they find some random stuff from Seattle's past, a lot of them will reach out to me saying, "Hey, do you want this stuff?" And this was one of those things where somebody found a bunch of documents and old publications about Bigfoot, i.e. Sasquatch. And they didn't really know what to do with it, so they sent it to me, and I had a fun afternoon just going through this stuff. So that's what that's from.
You call yourself an urban archaeologist or something like that, but you also write books about Seattle history.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about the two books that you got published?
Yeah, sure. So my first book was titled Seattle Prohibition, Bootleggers, Rum Runners, and Graft in the Queen City. And so the story of that is probably about 8 years ago at this point. I was at an estate sale, and I found an old moonshine still. And moonshine stills were what they used during Prohibition to make alcohol, illegal alcohol, because it wasn't legally available to purchase. And they were illegal, but people would have them in their basements and stuff. And I found one, and and I was able to find the documents that went with it that kind of told the story about it. And that triggered a fascination with me about what was going on here during the Prohibition era of the 1920s and 30s. So I started researching it, and I discovered, there have been some really great books that have been written about different parts of what was going on here. But none of the books really covered kind of the whole story and how everything was connected. So that led to my first book. That led me writing my first book about Seattle during Prohibition. And that was in 2019. During the research of that book, I discovered a really interesting character named Al Hubbard, who was involved in the whole story about what happened here during Prohibition.
Right.
And his story, even beyond Prohibition, is just fascinating. He had all kinds of exciting chapters to his life and something out of a Hollywood movie. And it was another one of those things where nobody had really written anything about him. No books have been written about him, but they should. You know, he's one of those characters where there should be about like 10 movies about the guy right now, and a Netflix miniseries and dozens of books. So that hasn't happened yet. So I decided to kind of be the first one to document his story. So that was my latest book that I just wrote. And that was recently published. Yeah, there's the cover for it. That was recently published in July of this year. So I'm still involved in promoting that and doing interviews and whatnot for that book.
Oh, that's cool. What makes him such a great figure that you decided to feature him?
That's a good question. Well, he had so many interesting parts of his life. He started out in 1919 here in Seattle with this invention that he claimed drew electricity from the air and then could be used to power boats and ships and airplanes. And so he was out promoting that for a couple of years, and a lot of people believed him. Now a lot of people look back at it and they think it might be kind of a fraud, or it was kind of a hoax he did. Then during Prohibition, he joined forces with the area's top bootlegger, a guy by the name of Roy Olmsted, and helped build communication devices on his ships and boats and planes and cars to help keep him out of legal trouble. They also built one of Seattle's first radio stations together that Roy Olmsted supposedly operated from his home, and supposedly, according to legend, used the radio broadcast to help send coded messages to his bootlegging operation. Then in World War II, after Prohibition, Al Hubbard was kind of a secret spy for the U.S. government. He was involved in this top secret operation that was going on back then to help smuggle parts to the Allied war effort. Then in the 1950s, he discovered the psychedelic LSD, and he became one of the first ones to develop a form of therapy for it to help people with mental health problems. And so he had all these crazy chapters in his life, and right now psychedelic therapy is kind of going through a resurgence, and a lot of people are looking at it as a very viable means to help treat different mental health issues. And they're now kind of going back and realizing that Al Hubbard, you know, was onto something back then.
Interesting.
So his story is very relevant today with what's going on in the mental health field.
Right. Let's see. What's one scientific invention you think Hubbard would come up with to combat these times we are in now?
Well, I think the psychedelic therapy would probably be the best candidate for that. Because, you know, I think a lot of people, especially during COVID and stuff, you're hearing about there's, you know, an increase in depression and anxiety, and different people are, if they have mental health issues, they're kind of being elevated during these times. So I think his psychedelic therapy that he developed is very useful right now to a lot of people. I'm not personally involved in that world. It's just something I stumbled across during my research. But from what I've read about it, it sounds like it's a viable thing right now. And they're doing a lot of studies at different colleges and universities and research centers to kind of research more about this. And a lot of the results that are coming back from it are very promising. And I predict probably in the next 5 or 10 years, that's going to be a regular part of mental health treatment.
Why do you think bootleggers were looked back on as a sort of anti-hero?
Yeah, they definitely were an anti-hero, especially Roy Olmsted. So I'll use Roy Olmsted. He was the area's top bootlegger as an example. They called him the gentleman bootlegger back then because he was he was smuggling booze and selling booze during Prohibition, which was illegal, but he did it in a very ethical way. He didn't allow his men to carry guns or engage in violence. And he himself didn't engage in other things like narcotics, gambling, prostitution. A lot of other bootleggers in different parts of the country were involved in that stuff, and he wasn't. He just wanted to stick with smuggling booze, and because of that, he became kind of a folk hero in this area. You know, a lot of people had a great deal of respect for him. He was greatly admired. He would stop along the street if people saw him walking down the street, and he would stop and chat with people. So he was very well liked back then. So I think that's kind of what made him an anti-hero. You know, he was a criminal. What he was doing was against the law, but a lot of people really held him in high regard.
Interesting. And the books that you are recently published, what is the name of that book that you just published this year?
Okay, yeah, that's called Seattle Mystic Alfred M. Hubbard, Inventor, Bootlegger, and Psychedelic Pioneer.
Okay, we talked about this. What about the one that you published in 2019? Also kind of similar theme to this one. Let me take a look. What is it called? Also Seattle Prohibition, Bootleggers, Rum Runners, and Graft in the Queen City.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of that around that you can hold up? Or
yeah, let's see here. I got a bookcase next to me. Here we go. Whoops.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Okay. So you know a lot about the different part of histories of Seattle. Any interesting stories? I know we've been covering about bootleggers and prohibition. What else can you share with our listeners about some of your finds, some of your artifacts, and the history of Seattle over the years that you find amusing and entertaining to share?
Yeah, the thing about Seattle that I've kind of discovered is it's gone through a lot of different stages. It's constantly changing. A lot of cities, you can say that about a lot of cities, but with Seattle, it's especially true. And it seems like Seattle kind of goes through these phases that last about 10 or 15 years. And then a new version of Seattle emerges at that point. So going back to, the Prohibition era, after the Prohibition era, post-World War II, Boeing started, and Boeing aircraft became, the top employer of the area. And Seattle was a very blue-collar region. They called it the Jet City because of Boeing.
Interesting.
And that lasted a couple decades. And it started changing primarily in the 90s when Microsoft moved in the region, and Seattle became more of a tech city than a blue-collar city. And that was really the start of things there. So that's when Seattle kind of emerged in its tech version, beginning in the mid to late 90s. And I would say now, it's still kind of in that phase right now, but I predict in the next few years, it's going to kind of shake that. And I think we're going to see a new version of Seattle emerge. That's my prediction. Right.
And what kind of Seattle do you think it would become?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's a lot of variables at play right now. Politics is definitely one of the variables. Kind of what happens post-COVID, because right now, a lot of the tech workers are working from home right now. And so what's happening is a lot of the tech workers are moving out of the city and into more rural areas because they can work from home full time. So that's going to change things. So there's a lot of kind of like different moving parts at play that are kind of going on right now from what I can see. I don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't know what the result's going to be, but I'll be interested to find out.
I find it interesting when you observed that Seattle was a blue-collar town in the early part of the century, and over time in the late part of the 20th century, it evolved into a tech town, which we know today. And you also contributed to historylink.org. You have been featured on Pacific Northwest Magazine along with some other ones. What I would be interested in knowing what kind of things you were able to contribute to the historylink.org, which I believe to be a pretty credible source of information.
Yeah, historylink.org is fantastic. It's a nonprofit local organization. They're based out of the Pike Place Market, but they've been around before even Wikipedia. And what they are is they are an online encyclopedia about Washington state history. So they've been around a long time, and they what they do, it's different than Wikipedia, because instead of just having a bunch of random people come in and contribute, they'll have they post essays about different aspects of Washington state history, and they have different local historians go in and write these essays, and each essay has to be very well sourced and well cited, meaning, you know, you have to show where you're getting this information from.
Right.
So because of that, it's considered a very legitimate source to get information from. And I believe you can, most schools and universities and stuff allow historylink.org to be cited as a credible source, whereas something like Wikipedia isn't, because you don't know where the information's coming from. But with HistoryLink, you do know where the you do know where the information's coming from and where all the sources are being used. So that's been a wonderful experience. I've been writing for them for about 3 years right now. I just finished an essay about the history of craft beer in Washington state. I'm about to start a new essay here soon about local travel guru Rick Steves. Do you know who Rick Steves is? He's got the show on
name.
Yeah, you'd probably recognize him. He's got a show on PBS, and
yes.
Show.
Right.
Yeah. So, and he also lives in Edmonds, so I'm going to be interviewing him soon for an essay about his life and stuff. So, yeah, HistoryLink's been great, and I hope to stay with them for a very long time. They're a wonderful organization, and I would encourage all your listeners to go check out their site and even help maybe donate, since they're a nonprofit, if they can.
That's fantastic. I just typed your name into, and you have 6 articles featured here. One about Norm Dix, which is a politician, and Al Hubbard. There's one about Jim McDermott, that he's still a politician here, I believe, in Washington state.
Yeah.
Paul Schell, I think he was a mayor.
He was one of Seattle's mayors, yeah.
Yeah. So you wrote about several politicians, and once you submit, are there people that would, verify, fact-finding, fact-check on these articles?
Yeah, absolutely. They have editors in place, and so once you write your essay, you submit your essay and your list of sources, and the editors check that out to make sure it's all credible and stuff, because they have their reputations at
stake.
At stake, thank you. And yeah, it's all very well researched and sourced.
Now, I know that you have a collection of artifacts that you will have at Edmonds Historical Museum, but it was delayed or changed because of the pandemic. What is in this exhibit, and when is that going to be on again? Do you know?
Yeah, so that's going on right now. So the exhibit is so one of the stories I uncovered, during my time out there discovering all these old artifacts, is I discovered the story about this lady named B. Haverfield, who back in the beginning of the 40s and through the 60s was a local sign designer here and designed many of Seattle's most iconic signs. Ivar's, the Cinerama, Dick's Hamburgers, and the Elephant Car Wash sign that they recently took down. So, her influence was huge, but nobody had really heard of her before. So I wrote a story for Pacific Northwest magazine, kind of about her life and her story, and it was very well received. It was very popular, and it got a lot of local interest about it. And so that spurred other projects regarding her work. And when I was writing this article, I was able to meet her daughter, who had a lot of bees. Bee passed away, I believe, in the 1980s, if I remember right. And her daughter has kept all her original sketches for these signs. And so I was able to go up to her house and look at these sketches and take pictures of them and stuff. And so what I was able to do is I've been working with the Edmonds Historical Museum for a number of years. I started out as a volunteer docent, and I've helped curate different exhibits that they've put on over the years. So I was able to like help put on this exhibit that's currently there right now, showing all of B. Haverfield's original sketches, and they're incredible. They're like works of art. They're very.
How do you spell her last name?
So it's Haver and then Field, Field, and then her first name is Bea.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So just in case if people are interested in learning more about her, they can Google using those words, those names.
Yeah.
The name. That sounds really cool and interesting. I know the Elephant Car Wash was a big thing when it went down. The Crocodile Cafe, I don't know who designed that, but that was a very interesting sign that went down during the renovation as well. And I lived actually right by that cafe, and so when the sign, so when they put the sign down to renovate, I thought they were closing. So I'm like, well, I love to have a piece of history. So maybe they can. I didn't know they were going to put it right there. But that was like something that I'm also very interested on, is those artifacts and part of Seattle iconic scene. So yeah, fascinating stuff. So what's next now that we have the books out and the exhibit? What are you working on for your next project?
Oh, I tell you, I always have some kind of project I'm involved in. So right now, I'm wrapping up my third book, and I'm co-writing that with a guy named Peter Blecka. He's a local writer who's been around for a long time. He's written a number of books about local music. And so we're writing a book together about Seattle roadhouses. Roadhouses, they were basically nightclubs that were around during Prohibition and beyond. And they basically acted as speakeasies during Prohibition. And then after Prohibition, they were still kind of running afoul of the law. They were operating as bottle clubs where, so after Prohibition here in Washington State, they didn't allow hard liquor to be served. Only beer or wine with very low alcohol volume could be served at restaurants and bars and places like that. So what a lot of these roadhouses did is they would encourage people to bring their own bottles of booze in with them. And then they would serve them mixers that they can make their own drinks with. This was against the law, of course, and they were always being raided by the police.
What year was this? What year were these?
So they started showing up in the 1920s, a lot of these roadhouses, and then they stuck around through the 30s, 40s. Most of them by the 1950s had disappeared. But they were around for, some of them were around for a few decades. And they were just these very notorious places that were always being raided by the police, and they were always in the newspaper. A lot of them had live music, so there was connections with local jazz and big band musicians. Yeah. But a lot of people don't know about them, so we're documenting the history. A lot of them operated on Highway 99, Aurora Avenue.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them also operated on Lake City Way, which is now known as Lake City Way. Back then it was the Pacific Highway. It's gone through a number of different names. And then some of them also operated south of the city.
Wow. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And then I also just started a podcast with a group of friends called Dim Lights and Stiff Drinks, the Dive Bars of Seattle. So it's another historical venture. We're going out and we visit these places and record live on location. And then we go over the history of whichever bar we happen to be visiting. So we're going, we're checking out all the historical drinking establishments and dive bars in the Seattle area. And so that's been a lot of fun too. And then of course I'm still continuing to write for History Link. So I got a few projects kind of going on.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much for accepting our invitation to come on Afternoons with Monique and share with our audience about your work and the books that you are writing and the exhibit in Edmonds Historical Museum. So it's going on right now. If people want to check it out, I'm just so glad that we have a chance to interview you today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been great.
It's wonderful. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and stay tuned for the next episode of Shattering the Glass Ceiling. Bye-bye.
Here with the Rainier Avenue Radio